It is clear, America is losing every war that it has started. I say this because as multiple conflicts erupt around the world, the US finds itself at the center of almost all of them. Just look at today's headlines. Today, the US struck more Houthi targets in Yemen. It took place at around 2:30 a.m. The United States military's Central Command said they struck 2 Houthi anti-ship missiles, resuming what US officials said were short-notice attacks. The US said these attacks are against the Iran-backed militia's imminent threats to merchant vessels, as well as Navy ships passing through the Red Sea and nearby waters. This is the 9th strike by the US on Houthis in just 2 weeks. It came a day after both the US and the UK carried out much larger military salvos against 9 sites in Yemen controlled by the Houthis. Those strikes against multiple targets at each location hit radars, drone and missile sites, and underground weapons storage bunkers. The Houthis, who control the most populous parts of Yemen, have said that their attacks on Red Sea shipping are in solidarity with Palestinians amid the Gaza war. These attacks have disrupted global shipping and deepened concerns that the fallout from this war, the Israel-Hamas war, could destabilize the entire West Asia region. Since the United States started striking Houthi military sites in Yemen on January 11th, the Pentagon says it has destroyed over 25 missile launch facilities and over 20 missiles. It says it has also struck drones, coastal radar, air surveillance capabilities, as well as weapons storage areas. The Pentagon spokesperson, Major General Patrick Ryder, said at a news briefing on Tuesday that the fact that the last Houthi attack was on January 18th suggests that the American strikes were having an impact. But is all that really true? Some analysts fear that the Houthis are not really deterred. They fear that the Houthis are just biding their time. Last week, Biden admitted that the American strikes won't stop the Houthis. He said in a briefing, and I quote, "Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes." So what is it that the Biden administration wants to achieve in Yemen? Biden's strategy in Yemen aims to weaken the Houthi militants, but it stops well short of trying to defeat the group altogether or directly confront Iran, which is the Houthis' main sponsor. According to American media outlets, this strategy seems to be a blend of limited military strikes, sanctions, and it appears this is aimed at punishing the Houthis while at the same time attempting to limit the danger of a wider regional conflict. In West Asia, the United States is maintaining war-level military deployment. Its aircraft carrier, the warship USS Gerald R. Ford, is stationed in the eastern Mediterranean. According to Reuters, Biden has signaled his approval for a sustained, if limited, air campaign, blessing a Pentagon strategy to put armed Reaper drones and other surveillance platforms up in the skies over Yemen. But what will they do? For starters, they will help the US warplanes and ships hit Houthi mobile targets as they pop up. But the question is, will it work? Will it work to protect the Red Sea shipping? The US formed a naval task force, remember? They call it Operation Prosperity Guardian. The point was to stop attacks by Houthis altogether. So far, it has been lackluster, to say the least. It has seen a tepid response from US partners. US allies like France, Italy and Spain are operating independently. Despite being a key regional player, Saudi Arabia is also absent from the US-led operation. It is because Saudi wants to avoid any negative impact on Yemen negotiations and its relations with Iran. Furthermore, the UAE's reluctance may stem from avoiding perceived support for Israel. That's perhaps why Operation Prosperity Guardian's inability to function as a coalition highlights divisions among US and its friends. This only adds to the doubts about the US's ability to drive international cooperative mechanisms. Do not forget, the Houthis may have turned the Red Sea into a war zone, but they are also a battle-hardened group. They have fought the Saudis for years. The Houthi missile threat is now known to be quite high. Their arsenal is substantially more. Therefore, Houthis have proven themselves to be a formidable adversary to the United States and its allies in the Red Sea. And that is exactly why that the US has no good options when it comes to combating the Houthis in the Red Sea. Before I tell you why, here's what else you need to know. Not just Yemen, the US also conducted airstrikes in Iraq. On Tuesday, the United States struck 3 facilities linked to Iran-backed militia, the Kataib Hezbollah. These strikes came after a weekend attack on an Iraqi airbase that wounded US forces. Since the Israel-Gaza war began in October last year, US troops in Iraq and Syria have been attacked about 150 times. That's right. This is a message from Tehran to its arch-nemesis, America, a message of resistance. You see, these attacks against the US are a form of retaliation for its support to Israel. The Iraqi government strongly condemned US strikes. A spokesperson for the Iraqi Prime Minister, Mohammad Shia al-Sudani, said the US strikes blatantly violated his country's sovereignty. The US is aware of the perils of such an escalation. The United States has tried to tread carefully, engaging with regional powers and sending messages that it wants no escalation. It has even openly demanded of its ally Israel that it limits civilian suffering in the war and end the root conflict, which is the Gaza war, as quickly as possible, that too, but to no avail. For the longest time, the United States has been the most powerful nation. It won 2 world wars. It defeated the Soviet Union, and it still possesses the world's top military. But for the past year and a half, the United States has imposed gigantic costs on Russia by supporting Ukraine. That has also started looking like a lost war. Then the US started supporting Israel in its war against Hamas. That has opened new fronts in West Asia. Let's not forget the issues in the Taiwan Strait, the Korean Peninsula. How many wars can America fight at the same time? All of America's adversaries, Iran, Russia, China, they're all prepared. But the question is the US ready for a war of great powers? Or more importantly, is America in any position to stop it if it boils down to it? From Washington, D.C., let's shift our focus to America's friend across the pond, the Great Britain, where the state of affairs is not that great, frankly speaking. More than 47,000 businesses are on the brink of collapse, and the British Prime Minister, Mr. Fix-It, cannot fix it. The UK economy is in the threat of recession. Its Prime Minister vowed to halve inflation and grow the economy, yet data collected in the final 3 months of 2023 shows that there has been a 25% jump in firms facing financial distress. This is the second consecutive quarter-on-quarter period when this has happened. Insolvency specialists released this data in their latest red flag report. It is as ominous as that sounds. More and more firms in London are on the brink of collapse than anywhere else in the country. The construction and property sectors seem to be the most hit, followed by the health and education sector. In 18 out of 22 sectors, there was double-digit growth in financial distress. Means most companies have reached critical condition. It is all thanks to a perfect storm of rising interest, soaring costs and faltering consumer confidence. 2023 was a difficult year for British businesses, and now every corner of the economy is suffering. How did they get here? To understand that, we have to go back to 2021, when the Bank of England raised interest rates from 0.1% to 5.25%. The goal was to tame inflation. That significantly increased cost of borrowing for British businesses. The hundreds of thousands of businesses that loaded up on affordable debt are now coming to terms with the added burden on their finances. Sadly for them, 2024 will be a fight for survival. Last year, the number of firms going bust had already reached the highest level since the great financial crisis of 2008. A big chunk of these firms are now sending the alarm signals. They are the ones expected to collapse over the next year, and this is adding to expectations that a recession in the UK is imminent. The next obvious question is, what is the UK government doing about this? Well, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has set out 5 priorities. 1. Halve inflation. 2. Grow the economy. 3. Reduce debt. 4. Cut waiting lists. 5. Stop the boats. In the first week of this year, he promised, and I'm quoting, "I fully expect to hold my government and I to account on delivering those goals." So I ask you, how has he fared so far? Let's take a look. His government's top priority was halving inflation by the end of 2023. In the 3-month period between October and December 2022, inflation was at 10.7%. So the aim was to reduce inflation to 5.3%. The government actually claimed to have met its target, when the monthly inflation figure for the year to October was 4.6%. But has there been any growth? Latest monthly figures for November show there has been very little growth in 2023. The quarterly figures show the economy grew 0.3% in the first 3 months of 2023. It had zero growth in the next 3 months. Then it shrank 0.1% between July and September. It seems the pledge to grow the economy only has been made more difficult by the UK government's promise to halve inflation. The Bank of England put up interest rates 14 times to stop prices rising so quickly. This reduces spending and slows down economic growth. And let's not forget, the UK government's debt also remains high. The latest figures for December showed that the government debt stood at 97.7% of the size of the economy. Sunak has often been projected as a problem solver. That's how he's been portrayed to the public since he arrived in Downing Street. But with the writing on the wall, Sunak, it seems, faces a bleak economic backdrop in the expected 2024 elections in the United Kingdom. If I told you that plants can talk, would you believe me? Long back, when Britain's King Charles was asked about this, about what he did in his garden, he said he would talk to plants and they would respond. You see, the king was convinced that they'd talk to him. Can someone now call him wrong or delusional? Because scientists have confirmed what King Charles has known from his youth, that plants do in fact talk to each other. They have now been caught in the act. Now let me make this clear. Plants don't talk the way you expect. They have their own language, so to speak. You see, plants are surrounded by a fine mist of compounds. They use these airborne compounds to communicate. You can think of them as scents or smells. These compounds warn plants of the dangers nearby like an alarm. Now, how do plants receive and respond to these alarms? That's exactly what Japanese scientists have recorded. Take a look. Now, let me explain what's exactly happening here. The scientists took 2 plants for the experiment. One tomato, another a common weed. Both the plant systems were connected using rigged air pumps. The leaves of the tomato plants were cut. They were also infested by caterpillars. Now, the scientists waited to see how the plants would react. One injured and another normal. How would they interact? As expected, the caterpillar-riddled tomato plant released airborne compounds. It wanted to alert its unaffected neighboring weed to brace up for the threat. But how did the weed respond? That is what you are seeing in this video on your screen. Do you see a fluorescent wave passing through the leaves? These are in fact calcium signals rushing within the plant, essentially signaling that a communication, or rather a talk, has taken place. Under normal conditions, you won't be able to see this phenomenon, but the weed that scientists use was genetically modified to emit fluorescent green light on detecting calcium ions. Now, was that too much science for you? Let's keep it simple. Scientists have known that plants can talk since the 1980s. They have detected it in more than 80 plant species, but it was for the first time that they captured it on camera. Up until now, they knew how plants sent messages. Like in this case, they knew how the injured tomato plant would alert the unaffected weed plant. What they didn't know was how this message would be received. But the experiment made it clear. The undamaged plant received the signal loud and clear and responded with a burst of calcium signaling across its outstretched leaves. You see, there's no idle chatter among plants. They know how to communicate efficiently and evade their predators.